To save the giant Apache sister from a forced marriage, the poor rancher offered a fake marriage. The desert wind howled across the jagged ridges of the frontier planet Aridia. 7. Carrying with it the smell of dry sand and scorched metal. In the early morning light, the horizon glimmered like a sea of molten gold, stretching endlessly into dust-filled skies. Settlers and ranchers carved a living here, but the planet's beauty was dangerous. Sandstorms could appear without warning, and raiders, both human and alien, stalked the borderlands. Life here was hard, brutal, and unforgiving. Among the settlers, Jared Callahan was one of the poorest. His small ranch clung stubbornly to a rocky plateau, barely big enough to feed a handful of livestock. Yet Jared was clever, resourceful, and fearless in ways that made up for his lack of wealth. While richer ranchers had advanced weapons and security drones, Jared had only his wits, a few mechanical traps, and a deep understanding of the harsh terrain. He had learned long ago that brains could beat brawn if applied correctly, and today he would need every ounce of that cunning. Across the canyon in the settlement of Red Mesa, a commotion was stirring. Guards of the Governor Malvec, the corrupt human official who ruled the colony with an iron fist, had arrived to seize someone. Jared squinted across the canyon and saw the figure they were after. Dakota, a towering Apache woman, strong and graceful, her dark eyes blazing with fury and fear. She was unlike anyone Jared had ever seen. Her height alone made her impossible to ignore, but it was the confidence in her stance, the intelligent flare in her eyes, and the aura of raw power that made her unforgettable. Jared had heard the whispers. Dakota's family had long protected Apache traditions on this planet, refusing to bow to the colonists' rules. Her strength made her valuable, but to Governor Malvec she was just another tool, a pawn in his plan to strengthen his militia and consolidate power. Dakota's marriage to his chosen man wasn't about love or respect. It was about control, and Jared couldn't allow it. He cursed under his breath, his fingers tightening around the railing of his small cliffside balcony. "Not this time," he muttered. "I won't let him take her." Jared knew the risks. Confronting Malvec openly was suicide. The governor had private guards, weapons, and bureaucratic laws stacked in his favor. But Jared had an idea, a desperate, dangerous, and probably insane idea. He would fake a marriage. It was simple in theory. If he could legally claim Dakota as his wife, the governor could not forcibly take her without causing a scandal. He and Dakota could appear as husband and wife to the law, buying her time, and maybe even freedom. The problem was convincing Dakota. Jared leaped down from his balcony and sprinted across his rocky terrain. Every step was calculated, every loose stone and jagged ridge considered. He had to reach her before the governor's men dragged her away. He reached the canyon's edge and called out, "Dakota!" "Wait!" The giant woman turned, eyes narrowing. For a moment, her fear gave way to curiosity.
"Who are you?"
she demanded, her voice deep and steady, even in the chaos. "Name's Jared," he said, catching his breath. I can help you, but you have to trust me." Her eyes flicked to the approaching guards. "Why would I trust a stranger?" she asked, her tone equal parts challenge and warning. "Because you have no one else," he said bluntly, "and because if we act fast, I can save you." She considered him, scanning the barren canyon as if weighing every word he said. The guards were closing the distance. They were armed, disciplined, and merciless. Dakota's jaw tightened. "And how exactly do you plan to save me?" Jared took a deep breath. "We fake a marriage. If the governor tries to claim you, he'll have to deal with me. He can't break the law, not without exposing himself." For a heartbeat, Dakota stared at him in disbelief. Then, a small smirk appeared on her lips. "A poor rancher offering a fake marriage to save me," she said. "You either have a death wish or guts bigger than your brains." "Maybe both," Jared admitted with a wry grin. "But right now, it's all we've got." Dakota looked at the approaching guards and then back at Jared. The choice was obvious: accept his plan and risk everything on a desperate gamble, or submit to Malvec's control. She nodded slowly. "Fine," she said. "We do it your way. For now." Jared felt a spark of relief. It was the first step, and it had to be convincing. He led her to a nearby abandoned chapel at the edge of the canyon, a relic from the first human colonists. Its walls were cracked, its stained glass shattered in places, but it was secluded enough for them to stage their plan. Jared moved quickly, using ropes and scraps of metal to create a makeshift altar. He even found a ceremonial cloth from the chapel's ruins to serve as a symbolic wedding garment. Dakota watched quietly, her presence commanding, her eyes sharp. "This better work," she said. "It will," Jared promised, though he wasn't entirely sure himself. He had never performed a fake marriage before, but he had studied frontier laws, and a clever loophole was all he needed. The ritual began. Jared improvised words that sounded official, invoking local human law and Apache tradition in a jumble of careful lies and ceremonial gestures. Dakota followed his lead, her strength and presence making the ceremony appear real to any casual observer. Outside the chapel, the governor's men had paused, confused by the sudden barricade of barricades Jared had rigged with clever mechanical devices. From above, Jared could see them shouting, trying to find a way in. It wasn't perfect, but it bought them time. Inside, Dakota's eyes softened slightly as she observed Jared's careful preparation. "You're clever," she said quietly, almost as if she were surprised by the human mind's capacity for strategy. "I do what I must," he replied. "It's the frontier. Brains beat brawn, usually." Their moment of quiet was broken by a loud crash. One of the chapel's outer walls shuddered under the weight of the governor's men trying to break in. Jared's pulse raced. "We need to finish now," he shouted. Dakota nodded, and with a final gesture, Jared completed the ceremony. He took her hand, spoke the final words, and declared them legally and ceremonially married, at least on paper. Outside, the guards hesitated. The fake marriage had some legal weight, thanks to Jared's knowledge of frontier laws. Malvec's forces were not sure how far they could push it without risking exposure. The moment gave Jared and Dakota precious time. Once the ceremony ended, Dakota looked at Jared, her eyes sharp and piercing. "You know this is only the beginning, right?" she asked. Jared smiled, though tension tightened his chest. "I know," he said. "And I'm ready." She raised an eyebrow. "I hope so, rancher. Out here, being clever isn't enough. Sometimes you have to fight with everything you have." Jared nodded. He looked out at the endless desert beyond the canyon, thinking of the battles to come. The governor was powerful, and his reach was long. But humans? Humans were adaptable. Humans could survive impossible odds. And Jared had a plan. It wouldn't be easy. There would be danger, traps, and battles ahead. But for the first time, Jared felt a surge of hope. He was not just a poor rancher anymore. He was a protector, a strategist, and maybe even a hero. Dakota squeezed his hand. "Let's see if you can really protect me, rancher," she said. Jared looked at her, seeing not just a giant Apache woman, but a partner, a force, a mind just as sharp as his own. "We'll do more than survive," he said. "We'll show them what humans and the people they underestimate are capable of." And with that, they stepped out of the chapel together, side by side, ready to face whatever the harsh frontier and the corrupt governor would throw at them next. The desert wind carried their determination across the ridges of Iridia. 7. Out here on the edge of the frontier, courage, intelligence, and trust were the only weapons that mattered, and Jared was armed to the teeth. The morning sun scorched the rocky canyons of Iridia. 7. And the desert wind carried a dry, bitter taste that cut across the settlement like a warning. Jared Callahan and Dakota had barely finished their makeshift ceremony before the reality of the situation sank in. The fake marriage had bought them time, but it had also made them highly visible targets. Governor Malvek's men were no fools. Even if they could not legally take Dakota, they could find other ways to pressure, intimidate, or corner her. And Jared knew that cleverness alone wouldn't keep them safe. Strength, strategy, and careful planning were just as necessary, and they had to act quickly. Jared led Dakota back to his small ranch, a ramshackle collection of metal panels and wooden beams perched on a narrow plateau. The ranch was tiny, with only a handful of animals and a few automated devices Jared had cobbled together. But it was defensible, and every rock, every ridge, and every trap was part of his careful plan. Dakota followed silently, her presence commanding the small space. She had towering strength and intelligence, but she had never been in a situation like this before, trapped between an oppressive governor and a man she barely knew. Still, she trusted him, for now. Once inside, Jared motioned to the scattered gadgets and makeshift barricades. "We need to prepare," he said. "They'll try to test us soon. I don't know exactly when, but they will." Dakota crossed her arms, examining the clutter of traps and equipment. "You're clever," she said. "I can see why people underestimate you." Jared gave a small smile. "Brains go a long way out here. And a few tricks don't hurt either." For a while, silence fell between them. The wind outside howled through the cracks in the walls, and the canyon seemed to stretch endlessly, a constant reminder of how exposed they were. Then Dakota spoke again. "You know, this fake marriage of ours, it might be more useful than I thought." Jared raised an eyebrow.
How do you mean?
"Well," she began, "Malvek won't want to violate it openly. It's a tool we can use, just like your traps and devices. Between your brains and my strength, we might actually stand a chance." Jared nodded, feeling a surge of hope. He had underestimated her not in strength, but in insight. Dakota wasn't just strong. She had a sharp mind capable of strategy and calculation. If they worked together, they could be unstoppable. Their moment of quiet was broken by the sound of hooves and shouting in the distance. Jared rushed to the edge of the plateau, peering down the canyon. Sure enough, a group of Malvek's men were approaching, armed and determined. They had brought a mix of terrain vehicles and walkers, technology designed for frontier combat. But Jared had his own tricks. He turned to Dakota. "Time to see how well you fight," he said. Dakota smiled faintly, adjusting her stance. "I was hoping you'd say that." Jared quickly explained the plan. They would use the canyon terrain, the ranch's traps, and clever distractions to slow the attackers. Every device, from the motion-triggered barricades to the smoke emitters, had a purpose. The first encounter was intense. Malvek's men moved with precision, but Jared's traps forced them to split up, stumble, and fall into shallow pits. Dakota moved with surprising agility for her size, grabbing attackers, using their weight against them, and throwing them aside without injury. Her strength was incredible, but it was her intelligence that impressed Jared most. She anticipated every move, adapted to their tactics, and worked seamlessly with him. From the cliffs above, Jared directed movements, signaling Dakota when to engage or hold back. Their communication was silent, almost instinctive, as if they had fought together for years. The battle ended with Malvek's men retreating, bruised, frustrated, and humiliated. Jared and Dakota stood side by side, panting and covered in dust, victorious for the moment. "This is just the start," Jared said, wiping sweat from his brow. "You won't give up. Not now. Not ever." Dakota nodded, her eyes focused. "Then we'll be ready. I trust you, Jared. But don't make me regret it." Jared laughed softly. "Don't worry. I plan to stay alive as much as you do." In the following days, the two began to truly work together. Dakota learned about Jared's ranch technology, simple, clever devices designed to give humans an advantage over stronger opponents. She helped him improve them, using her knowledge of physics and leverage. Jared, in turn, taught her human legal tricks, how to manipulate appearances, and how to use bureaucracy as a shield against Malvek's power. The fake marriage also played a crucial role. Whenever the governor tried to send spies or messengers to intimidate Dakota, she could respond with authority. "I am married," she would say, her voice firm and unwavering. "Any attempt to interfere with my husband will be considered an act of law-breaking." Even a hint of hesitation from the governor's enforcers showed her words carried weight. But their partnership wasn't just about tactics. Slowly, trust began to grow. Dakota saw that Jared's courage was real, not performative. He risked his life to protect her, calculated risks to gain the upper hand, and never hesitated to act in her interest. She, in turn, impressed him with her wisdom, strength, and calm determination. Together, they were learning something rare in the frontier: respect, trust, and unity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the jagged cliffs, they sat on the edge of the plateau, watching the horizon. Dakota broke the silence. "You know, when I agreed to this fake marriage, I thought it was a gamble," she said. "But you're different. You fight with your mind as much as your courage. That's human, isn't it?" Jared smiled, gazing at the fading light. "Yes, humans adapt, survive, and sometimes we surprise even ourselves. Out here, it's the clever and brave who make it through." A sudden sound of movement in the canyon below reminded them that danger was always near. Malvek wasn't idle. He was learning, adapting, and preparing. But Jared no longer felt fear, at least not paralyzing fear. He felt determination. And beside him, Dakota was no longer just someone he had to protect. She was a partner, equal in every sense. That night, they patrolled the ranch together, setting traps, checking devices, and planning contingencies. The desert was quiet, but the wind carried whispers of Malvek's plotting. The governor would not rest until he had Dakota, and Jared knew that. But he also knew that cleverness, strength, and unity could level even the most uneven battlefield. Days passed, each bringing new skirmishes, tests, and small victories. Dakota learned to anticipate ambushes. Jared refined his defensive devices, and together they became a formidable team. Their fake marriage had become a symbol, a shield, and a strategy, all rolled into one. And yet, the shadow of Malvek loomed. He would not be defeated by tricks alone. Sooner or later, he would come personally, bringing his full force. Jared and Dakota both knew it, and it gave them no comfort, but it also gave them purpose. "We'll have to face him eventually," Dakota said one evening, checking one of Jared's automated barriers. "And when that day comes, we fight smart. No mistakes, no hesitation." Jared nodded, adjusting a sensor. "Exactly. And when we do, they'll see why humans, and those who trust them, are more dangerous than anyone expects." For the first time, both felt it: the thrill of the frontier, the fear of an unbeatable enemy, and the exhilaration of being alive, clever, and united. As the twin moons of Iridia, 7 rose above the cliffs, casting pale light over the canyon, Jared and Dakota stood side by side. Their fake marriage had started as a gamble, a desperate plan to save her from forced control. But now it was something more. A partnership, a bond, and a declaration that even the weakest and the poor could stand against the strongest and most corrupt. And they both knew that the battles ahead would test them like never before. But one thing was certain: together they would survive. Together they would fight. And together they might just win. The desert wind carried their determination across the jagged cliffs. Out here on the edge of civilization, only the clever, the strong, and the united could survive. And Jared Callahan and Dakota were ready to prove that humans, no matter how underestimated, could triumph against impossible odds. The desert sun rose over Iridia 7, turning the jagged cliffs to gold. Jared and Dakota had spent the night fortifying the ranch, repairing broken traps, and preparing for what they both knew would come. The attack from Malvec's men a few days ago had been only the beginning. Jared stood on a rocky ridge, scanning the horizon with his binoculars. The settlements below were quiet, but that calm made him uneasy. "They're planning something bigger," he said, lowering the binoculars. "Last time it was just a small team. Next time it will be everything he can send." Dakota tightened her hand around the handle of a modified spear Jared had built for her, a combination of frontier metal and lightweight alloys. She didn't need weapons to fight, but she appreciated having tools prepared. "Then we'll be ready," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "We've survived the first test. The next one will be harder, but we're stronger together." Jared nodded. "Stronger, yes. But smarter too. We can't just rely on strength." They had spent hours studying the governor's tactics, predicting where and when his forces might strike. Jared had mapped the canyons, noting every ridge, pit, and narrow path that could be turned into an advantage. Dakota had trained relentlessly, learning how to move with agility despite her size, and how to use her immense strength to control attackers without unnecessary risk. By mid-morning, the first signs of Malvec's plan appeared. Drones appeared on the horizon, glinting in the sun, scanning the plateau. Jared's traps alerted him instantly. Motion sensors and noise triggers had been installed along every approach. "Here they come," Jared whispered. "Time to see how smart they really are." The drones swooped closer, emitting scanning beams that could detect heat and movement. Jared ran to a concealed lever and activated a series of automated decoys. Clay models of humans with small heat sources hidden inside. The drones detected them, sending signals back to the approaching forces. Dakota stood beside him, her massive form ready. "They'll think the ranch is empty," she said, a hint of a grin on her lips. "They don't know we're waiting." When the first wave of ground troops arrived, Jared's traps were ready. Automated spike pits opened beneath their wheels. Small but powerful magnetic pulses disabled their vehicles temporarily, and hidden blasters fired smoke screens to confuse their sensors. The governor's forces faltered immediately, their careful plan disrupted. Dakota moved like lightning. She grabbed one soldier by the armor, threw him over her shoulder, and spun him into another trap. Her strength, precision, and calm strategy made her unstoppable. Jared watched in admiration. Not only was she powerful, but she was precise, tactical, and fearless. One of the soldiers fired a plasma rifle toward them, but Jared had anticipated it. A small mirror device he had built reflected the beam harmlessly into the canyon wall. Dakota ducked behind it, moving with ease and watching for the next attack. Despite the chaos, Jared and Dakota communicated silently, using subtle hand gestures and quick eye signals. Every move was calculated, every trap and counterattack synchronized. Together, they became a single unit, blending brains and strength into something the governor could not have predicted. Hours passed, and the governor's forces began to retreat, but they were not defeated. Malvek had sent only the first wave. A test. Jared knew it, and he knew the real battle was yet to come. After the skirmish, Dakota leaned against a wall, breathing heavily but composed. "They're stronger than last time," she said. "The governor is learning?" "Yes," Jared admitted. "And so are we. But we need more than just defense. If he keeps sending waves, eventually he'll overwhelm us." Dakota nodded, understanding the challenge. "Then we need to go on the offensive." Jared considered it. Malvek's strength lay not only in his soldiers, but in his unpredictability and resources. An offensive move could provoke him, but staying passive could lead to inevitable defeat. They needed a plan that combined strategy, deception, and human ingenuity. Over the next few days, they prepared. Jared improved his traps, set up false paths, and created a series of hidden positions in the cliffs. Dakota learned to coordinate attacks using her size and speed to control enemy movement, guiding them into Jared's traps. Together, they practiced maneuvers, anticipating every possible move the governor could make. Their fake marriage continued to play an important role. Any communication from Malvek had to go through formal channels, and the law now recognized Dakota as Jared's wife. Every attempt to intimidate or coerce her was met with firm resistance. Her status as his partner gave them a shield of legality, a symbolic victory that frustrated Malvek but bought them precious time. One evening, as they checked the last of their traps, Jared spoke. "We can't wait for him to strike next. We need to draw him into the canyon, make him fight where we control the battlefield." Dakota studied the terrain, her eyes scanning the cliffs and ridges. "We can use the narrow passages. He won't have room to maneuver his vehicles or troops. And with the traps we've set, he'll regret underestimating us." Jared nodded. "Exactly. But we have to be careful. One mistake, one miscalculation, and we could lose everything." They set their plan in motion over the next few days, carefully leading Malvek's scouts into traps, intercepting messages, and slowly luring him closer to the canyon where they had prepared their defenses. Each encounter tested their skills and their trust in one another. Mistakes could have been fatal, but their teamwork minimized risk. Then the day came. Malvek arrived personally, commanding his elite troops and advanced war machines. The governor's arrogance was palpable. He believed that wealth, technology, and intimidation would crush the poor rancher and his giant bride. He did not realize that humans, and Dakota in particular, were adaptable, intelligent, and unpredictable. The canyon became a battlefield. Jared's traps activated as planned, slowing and disorienting the governor's forces. Smoke, mirrors, and mechanical distractions caused confusion. Dakota moved with unmatched precision, taking down soldiers who tried to advance while guiding others into strategically placed pits and nets. Malvek watched in frustration as his plan unraveled. "Impossible," he shouted, pounding his control console. "How can a single rancher and one woman cause such chaos?" Jared stood on a ridge directing Dakota and the traps. Humans adapt, humans survive, and humans never underestimate the power of brains over brawn. Dakota swung her spear with perfect accuracy, disabling drones and disarming soldiers, her presence commanding respect and fear. She moved with grace, speed, and raw power, but every action was calculated. She wasn't just fighting, she was controlling the battlefield. The governor's elite troops began to falter. Their technology could not compensate for human ingenuity and Dakota's strength. Every ambush, every trap, every clever maneuver brought them closer to defeat. Malvek realized he had underestimated them, and now he was paying the price. His pride had blinded him to the reality of frontier survival. Intelligence, courage, and trust were as powerful as weapons and armies. By sunset, the governor's forces were retreating, beaten and demoralized. Jared and Dakota stood side by side, victorious, their trust in each other strengthened by the day's battle. "Not bad," Dakota said, wiping dust from her armor. "For a poor rancher, you've got guts." Jared laughed, though fatigue weighed heavily on him. "And you've got brains. And strength. We make a good team." But even in victory, they knew it was not over. Malvek would return. He would bring more forces, more technology, more tricks. They had won today, but the frontier was relentless, and challenges were never-ending. Yet, for the first time, both felt confident. Together they could face anything. Jared's cleverness and Dakota's power created a combination that no tyrant could easily overcome. Their fake marriage had started as a desperate gamble, but it had grown into a powerful alliance, a partnership forged in danger, strategy, and trust. As night fell and the twin moons of Iridia, 7 rose, Jared and Dakota surveyed the battlefield. The desert wind carried the distant echoes of retreating machines and frustrated cries. "We'll be ready next time," Jared said. "He won't catch us off guard again." Dakota nodded. "And when he comes, he'll learn exactly why humans are not to be underestimated." They stood together side by side, looking at the horizon. Out here in the harsh desert, only the clever, the strong, and the united survived. And Jared and Dakota were ready for whatever came next. The governor might strike again, but he would learn a hard lesson. Humans, even the poor and underestimated, were more dangerous than anyone thought, especially when brains, courage, and trust were combined. The morning sun burned red over the cliffs of Iridia, 7, casting long shadows across the jagged canyon floor. Jared Callahan and Dakota had spent the previous night preparing for what they both knew would be the ultimate test. Governor Malvek was coming personally, bringing his full force, advanced war machines, elite troops, and every tactical advantage he could muster. This was no longer a skirmish. It was a battle that would decide the fate of the canyon and of Dakota's freedom. Jared paced near the edge of the plateau, checking his maps and coordinates for the last time. Every trap, every false path, every clever distraction had been laid. "This is it," he said quietly. "If we make one mistake, it's over. But if we get it right..." Dakota's shadow fell across him. She leaned on her spear, her posture relaxed, but her eyes sharp. "We won't make mistakes," she said. "We've survived worse than this. And I trust you." Jared smiled faintly, grateful for her confidence. "Then let's finish this." Below them, the governor's convoy appeared, a line of sleek, armored vehicles and heavily armed soldiers. The air shimmered with heat and tension, and the drones above scanned every ridge and canyon path. Malvek's face was pale with rage, his pride wounded by previous defeats. He had underestimated Jared and Dakota once, and he would not make that mistake again, or so he thought. Jared activated the first stage of his plan. Smoke emitters along the canyon ridges released thick, white clouds, confusing sensors and visibility. Holographic decoys appeared, scattered across the plateau, mimicking human movement. The governor's troops fired indiscriminately, unsure which targets were real. Dakota moved with incredible speed and precision, striking from hidden positions. She grabbed soldiers and hurled them into spike pits or nets, using their own momentum against them. Her size was intimidating, but it was her intelligence and control that made her terrifying. She wasn't just fighting, she was orchestrating chaos. Jared coordinated from the ridge, signaling Dakota and activating traps. Automated barriers collapsed to block paths, while magnetic pulses disabled enemy vehicles temporarily. Every move was calculated, every device placed with care. The canyon had become a deadly chessboard, and Jared and Dakota were always 2 steps ahead. Malvek's frustration grew. "Impossible," he shouted through his communicator. "They're just humans. They cannot possibly control this battlefield." But humans were unpredictable, adaptable, and clever. Jared had anticipated every route the governor could take. Every ambush had been planned, every trap tested. And Dakota, she was more than muscle. She was a strategist, a force of nature who executed plans with terrifying precision. The battle intensified. Explosions echoed across the canyon as energy blasts struck rocks and traps. Soldiers shouted, machines ground against metal, and the air was thick with smoke, dust, and tension. Yet, amidst the chaos, Jared and Dakota moved seamlessly, their partnership nearly perfect. At one point, a massive Walker vehicle barreled down the canyon, aiming to crush their position. Jared activated a pulley system he had rigged with heavy chains and rocks. The chains swung down like a giant pendulum, toppling the Walker into a pit he had disguised as flat ground. Dakota leaped down from a ridge, disarming soldiers trying to escape, her movements swift and precise. Malvek's confidence wavered. He realized that brute force alone would not win this battle. Jared and Dakota had turned the canyon into a trap, using intelligence, environment, and teamwork to neutralize superior technology. "You think you can outsmart me?" Malvek growled, stepping from his armored command vehicle. He carried a personal energy rifle, deadly accurate, and his expression was filled with determination and fear. "I will not be humiliated again." Jared looked down from the ridge, meeting Malvek's gaze. "I don't need to outsmart you," he said calmly. "I just need to survive and protect her, and right now that's more than enough." Dakota's hand brushed his. "We finish this together," she said. "No mistakes." Malvek advanced, firing at them, but Jared had already predicted this. Using a combination of reflective surfaces, smoke, and quick movements, they dodged every shot. Dakota charged, using the terrain to her advantage, moving like a living weapon. She was unstoppable, but her movements were calculated, ensuring minimal risk to herself and Jared. The governor's troops were scattered, confused, and exhausted. Malvek realized that continuing the assault would only bring further losses. He decided to confront them personally, stepping out of cover with a rage-filled roar. Jared and Dakota exchanged a glance. It was time. This was the moment they had been preparing for. They led Malvek into a narrow canyon path where the terrain gave them full control. Hidden spikes, falling rocks, and preset barricades turned the path into a deadly corridor. Dakota moved first, engaging Malvek's bodyguards, using her strength to incapacitate without killing. Jared activated the final trap, a massive net rigged with chains and weighted rocks. Malvek charged blindly, enraged. But as he ran, the net fell, entangling his legs and arms. Rocks and chains pinned him in place, leaving him vulnerable. Dakota stepped forward, her spear aimed precisely but not to kill. She spoke clearly and calmly. "This ends now," she said. "Your soldiers are retreating. Your machines are disabled. And your arrogance, has brought you here. Leave or face defeat." Malvek struggled, his pride warring with the reality of the situation. I will not be humiliated," he growled. Jared stepped closer, his calm voice contrasting the governor's fury. "It's not humiliation, it's the truth. You underestimated us. Humans survive. Humans fight. And humans, especially when united, cannot be controlled by tyrants. Dakota's eyes glinted. Your greed and arrogance cost you everything. You could have been clever, like us, but you chose fear and force instead. And now you lose. With the governor captured and his troops retreating, the canyon fell silent. Dust hung in the air and the sun's rays glinted off broken machinery and scattered weapons. Jared and Dakota stood side by side, victorious but exhausted. The victory was not just physical, it was symbolic. The poor rancher and the giant Apache woman had defied impossible odds, outsmarted advanced technology, and proven that courage, intelligence, and trust were more powerful than brute force. Dakota turned to Jared, a faint smile on her lips. "You were right," she said softly. "Brains and courage, sometimes that's all you need." Jared chuckled, brushing dust from his clothes. "And a little luck," he added. But mostly teamwork. For the first time, both felt a sense of true accomplishment. They had survived, defended what mattered, and proven that even the underestimated, humans, the poor, the seemingly weak, could triumph against powerful foes. The desert wind swept across the canyon, carrying away the echoes of battle and leaving behind silence. Jared looked at Dakota, his partner, his ally, and realized something important. The fake marriage had begun as a clever ruse, but it had grown into something deeper: respect, trust, and the start of something real. Dakota looked back at him, her eyes softening. "We did it," she said. "Together." Jared nodded. "Yes, together." They stood there, surveying the canyon, knowing that the frontier would always be dangerous. But they had proven that humans, clever, courageous, and united, could survive, adapt, and thrive even against overwhelming odds. Malvek would not easily forget this defeat, but he had learned a lesson he could not ignore. Humans were not to be underestimated. Even a poor rancher, using his mind and courage, could outsmart the strongest forces. And a giant Apache woman, strong and clever, could turn the tide of any battle. As the twin moons rose over Iridia, Seven, Jared, and Dakota walked back to the ranch together. The canyon was quiet now, but the memory of the battle lingered. It had been hard, brutal, and intense, but they had triumphed. And that triumph would carry them forward into the challenges yet to come. They had survived the ultimate confrontation, and they had done it as a team.